Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're diving into something super interesting: how social scientists take those everyday hunches we all have about the world and turn them into real, solid research. Let's get into it.
You know how it is. You're watching people and you think, I have a theory that people who own dogs are friendlier. Or, I bet people are more generous when the sun is shining. We all do it. Well, social science is basically the formal way of taking those little sparks of curiosity and putting them to the test to see if they actually hold any water.
See, it's not just guesswork. There's a real structured journey with clear steps. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to walk through that exact process, from a simple idea all the way to a published finding. So, where do we even begin? Well, it all starts with this really crucial first step: taking a vague feeling, that initial hunch, and shaping it into a sharp, focused, and, this is the most important part, testable question. This is where a simple thought starts to become actual science. This right here is such a great way to think about it. Before a researcher can even ask a new question, they have to understand the conversation that's already happening. Theories give them the concepts and the frameworks. It's like having a shared vocabulary and grammar that lets them build on what other people have already figured out and communicate their own ideas clearly. And that brings us to this key process called conceptualization. I know, it sounds super academic, but trust me, the idea is pretty straightforward. It's really just about defining your terms. If you want to study something like, say, happiness, you can't just leave it as this fuzzy, abstract idea. You have to get really, really specific.
Okay, so check this out. It's a perfect example of how this works. You start with a big, abstract concept, like poverty. Then, you start breaking it down into different dimensions. Are you talking about absolute poverty, where someone literally can't get basic necessities? Or are you talking about relative poverty, where someone is poor compared to the average in their society? Finally, you pick concrete, measurable indicators, like chronic hunger, that tell you, yes, this thing we're studying is present. And just like that, you've gone from a fuzzy idea to something you can actually go out and observe.
So this is the magic, right? This transformation. You're moving from the messy, everyday hunch on the left to the clean, structured hypothesis on the right. A casual thought like, people who live apart seem to stick together more, gets totally refined. It becomes this formal hypothesis that uses precise, defined concepts: residential segregation and collective identification, and it proposes a super clear relationship between them. It's not just a thought anymore. It's a real scientific claim that's ready to be put to the test. All right, so you've got your sharp, testable hypothesis. What's next? Well, you can't just run out and start asking people questions. You need a plan, a blueprint for how you're going to test it. That's where research design comes in. You know, the kind of blueprint you pick really depends on what you're trying to find out. If your goal is to prove that one thing causes another, you're probably going to lean towards an experimental design where you can actually control the conditions. But if you just want to get a snapshot of what a large group of people thinks or believes, then a survey design is probably your best bet. Choosing the right design is everything if you want results you can trust. And that leads to a huge question, maybe the question for any researcher. How can you be sure that your results are legit, that what you found wasn't just a fluke? How do you make sure your conclusions are actually trustworthy? Well, the answer has a name: internal validity. Basically, it all comes down to confidence. Let's say you're testing a new teaching method. You need to be as sure as possible that it was your method that made the test scores go up, and not some other random thing, like maybe the students in your test group were just a bit smarter to begin with. And you better believe researchers are always on the lookout for things that could mess up that confidence. I mean, what if some people just drop out of your study halfway through? That's called attrition, and it could totally skew your results. So a good researcher plans for this. They might try to figure out why people are leaving or use some fancy stats to adjust for the missing people. A really solid research design sees these problems coming and builds in protections right from the start. Okay, you have your hypothesis, you've got a solid design. Now we get to the fun part: actually collecting the evidence. This is where the theory hits the road, it moves from paper into the real world. And let me tell you, a huge part of this comes down to asking good questions. Just look at this example. It's a classic don't. It's called a double-barreled question because it's really asking two things at once. If someone answers yes, what are they agreeing to? The medical payments? The hospital tariffs? Both? You have no clue. The golden rule? One question, one idea. That's it. Keep it simple. Researchers also have to decide what kind of questions to ask. Open-ended questions are amazing for getting rich, detailed answers in someone's own words. But if you need to analyze data from thousands of people, closed-ended questions, with multiple choice answers, are way more efficient. It's all about picking the right tool for the job. So you've done the hard work, you've crunched the numbers, you've found something interesting. You're done, right? Nope. The final, and you could argue the most important step, is sharing what you found. Because research that just sits on a computer doesn't help anyone. And this table really breaks it down perfectly. How you share your results depends completely on who you're talking to. If you're talking to other academics, you'll write a super detailed journal article that gets into all the nitty-gritty. If a company hired you, you're going to focus on the practical takeaways and recommendations. And for the rest of us, you'd probably see it as a short newspaper report that just hits the main points. See? The audience is everything. So you might be thinking, okay, so they did the study, question answered, case closed, right? Well, not really. Almost never, in fact. The whole point of reporting your findings is to add your voice to this huge, ongoing scientific conversation. Your study is one more piece of the puzzle, and hopefully it inspires other people to ask new questions and do more research. It's a cycle that never really ends. And that, believe it or not, brings us right back to where we started, with a simple hunch. Now that you've seen the whole process, think about it for a second. What's an everyday theory you have about the way people work? How would you take that idea and turn it into a real testable question? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this one.